My name is Lila Nguyen. I'm 26 years old, and I'm the youngest of four siblings. My brothers Ethan and Vincent and my sister Clara are all more than a decade older than me. By the time I was old enough to start remembering birthdays, they were already off at college, working their high-powered jobs, traveling, getting engaged. To them, I was just the kid, a late addition to the family, barely part of their world. I always felt like I'd accidentally shown up in someone else's story. But the thing is, I loved them. When you're the youngest, you look up to your siblings like they're gods. I thought Ethan walked on water. He was always sharply dressed, always in control. Clara was the glamorous one with perfect eyeliner and a life that seemed lifted from Instagram. Vincent, the quieter one, was the only sibling who occasionally made time to talk to me about books or movies, even if it was just for 5 minutes. I used to sit at the bottom of the stairs when I was 9 or 10, pretending to read while I listened to them talk in the kitchen. I'd cling to every word, just hoping someone would notice me. Sometimes I'd even rehearse what I might say if I got to join in. The first time I realized I truly didn't belong was Ethan's wedding. I was 10 years old. It was the first time I'd ever been excited about something grown up. My mom had taken me shopping, and I begged her for this pale yellow dress with tiny lace flowers. I remember clutching it in the dressing room like it was treasure. A few days later, I asked if I could borrow one of her pearl necklaces to wear to the ceremony. She paused, hesitated, and then gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sweetheart, Ethan and Melanie are having an adults-only wedding. You won't be going." I blinked. But I'm his sister. I'm not just some random kid. "I'll be quiet. I promise." Her voice didn't change. "It's just how they planned it, honey. You'll understand when you're older." But I didn't understand. I didn't understand why my brother, the one who used to lift me onto his shoulders and let me steal fries off his plate, suddenly didn't want me there. I didn't understand why I had to stay home while the rest of the family got dressed up and left in a flurry of perfume and suit jackets. That day, I sat in my room wearing the yellow dress anyway. I curled up on the floor beside my window, watching the street, imagining the flowers, the music, the cake. I imagined Ethan smiling at me and saying, "I'm so glad you're here." But he didn't say that. He never even mentioned it. Not when they came back from the honeymoon. Not once. 2 years later, Clara got engaged. I was 12 then, and I thought, no, I hoped things would be different. I wasn't a little kid anymore. I was polite, quiet, and careful not to cause trouble. I always did my chores. I got good grades. I stayed out of the way. So when my parents mentioned that Clara was planning a destination wedding in Tulum, I lit up. I remember asking casually one evening at dinner, "Will I get to go too?" My dad barely looked up from his tablet. "It's adults only, sweetheart." I didn't cry this time. I told myself I wouldn't. Instead, I nodded, pretending I didn't care, and cleared my plate. But inside, it felt like someone had punched a hole in my chest and walked away without looking back. Clara sent me a postcard after the wedding, a photo of a beach. She wrote, "Wish you were here. The ceremony was magical." There was a smiley face at the end. I remember staring at it for a long time, not sure if it was supposed to be a joke or a slap in the face. At school, kids were talking about their siblings, about how their brothers and sisters took them to the mall, or taught them to drive, or helped them sneak snacks into movie theaters. I nodded and smiled like I could relate, but the truth was, I couldn't. I wasn't anyone's little sidekick. I was a shadow trailing behind a family that never really turned around. When I turned 15, Vincent, the sibling I'd been closest to, got engaged to a woman named Olivia. Their wedding was set to be a big modern affair at a rooftop hotel in San Francisco. For a moment, I had hope. Vincent used to talk to me. He was the only one who ever asked me what I was reading or remembered my birthday without a calendar alert. So I sent him a message. "I'd love to be there for your big day. I can help set up or just stay out of the way. Whatever you need." He never replied. A week later, my mom sat me down at the kitchen table. She gave me that voice again, the one she used when she was about to say something she knew would hurt. "Vincent and Olivia are keeping the guest list tight. Just adults. It's nothing personal." Of course it was personal. It had always been personal. I wasn't family to them. I was background noise. That night, I closed the door to my room, turned off my phone, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. My chest ached in a way I didn't have words for yet. I didn't cry. I just went still. 3 weddings, 3 rejections, and not once had any of them looked at me and said, "But wait, she's our sister. She should be there." I stopped asking after that. After Vincent's wedding, something inside me shut down. I didn't announce it. I didn't slam doors or yell or tell anyone off. I just quietly stopped trying. By the time I turned 16, I had already learned how to disappear in my own house. I stopped lingering in the kitchen when the others visited. I stopped asking when the next family dinner was. I stopped hoping for any kind of invitation. Instead, I poured myself into school. I'd always been good with numbers, neat, predictable, logical, unlike people. So I focused hard, chased internships, studied for certifications before most people my age even thought about them. I worked hard enough that, by the time I graduated at 22, I already had a job lined up at a mid-size auditing firm in Seattle. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And when I moved into my tiny one-bedroom apartment downtown, I felt something that almost resembled peace. No more walking into rooms where I didn't belong. No more pretending that I didn't notice when my name was left off group chats or family photo albums. For a while, I told myself I was fine. I built a new routine, coffee on the balcony before work, long walks with podcasts. A small but solid circle of friends from the office. Nothing dramatic, just people who liked me for who I was. I even got into solo travel, quiet weekends in coastal towns. I liked the solitude. I liked not having to explain myself. But of course, family finds a way to linger. Sometimes I'd scroll through Instagram and see Ethan's family posing in matching sweaters for Christmas. The kind of photo where everyone's got their arms around each other, laughing like they were born into warmth. No mention of me. Not even a tag. Or Clara, posting photos from her yoga retreats in Bali, writing about the importance of releasing toxic energy. Well, I remembered how she used to talk over me like I wasn't even in the room. The worst was Vincent. He and Olivia had a baby girl when I was 25. I found out through a distant cousin's reposted story. Her name was Lila. My name. At first, I thought it had to be a coincidence, but it wasn't. They'd named their daughter after me. The sister they didn't even invite to their wedding. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, staring at the screen. A perfect photo of Olivia holding baby Lila in a flowered wrap, with Vincent smiling down at them like life had always been perfect. And I realized something that chilled me to the bone. They didn't hate me. They just didn't think I mattered. I wasn't worth remembering, worth including. Not in their real lives, anyway. I was a name they could borrow for a baby because it was pretty, not a person with a history, a heartbeat, 1,000 small memories of being left behind. That night, I deleted the apps off my phone. Instagram, Facebook, everything. I didn't want to watch anymore. I didn't want to be a quiet witness to a life I was never invited into. If they wanted me out, then fine, I was out. I met Marco on a rainy Thursday in February. It was one of those days where the sky never really brightens, and everything feels like it's wrapped in fog. I was grabbing coffee on my lunch break, my regular spot where the barista knew my name but not my story. Marco was standing behind me in line, looking at the pastries like they held the answers to something bigger. He muttered something about croissants being morally superior to muffins, and I turned, caught off guard by how serious he looked. I laughed. Genuinely laughed, for the first time in weeks. That's how it started. A conversation about breakfast pastries and the weather. And somehow, from that tiny spark, we unraveled toward each other. Marco was a structural engineer. Thoughtful, steady, and easy to talk to in a way that felt unfamiliar. He didn't interrupt. He didn't make everything about himself. He didn't look at me like I was less than or not enough. He just listened. For the first few months, we kept things light. Work, food, weekend hikes. But one night, about 6 months in, I found myself sitting on his couch with a glass of wine, staring at a photo on his bookshelf. A family picture. Smiling parents, 2 younger sisters hugging him from either side. He noticed me looking. "They're kind of the best," he said softly. "We fight sometimes, but they always show up." I didn't say anything. I just kept staring at the frame, the warmth of it, the ease. He must have noticed the shift in my face because he reached over, touched my hand lightly, and asked, "Hey, do you want to talk about your family?" No one had ever asked me that before. Not like that. Not gently. Not because they cared. I hesitated, then nodded. And once I started, I couldn't stop. I told him everything. How I was left out of every wedding. How I sat in a yellow dress on the day of Ethan's ceremony hoping for a miracle. How Clara sent me a postcard like that would make up for her absence. How Vincent named his child after me but never even looked me in the eye long enough to say I mattered. When I finished, Marco didn't speak for a moment. He just looked at me like he saw the weight I'd been carrying. All those invisible scars stacked over the years. Then he said it. The sentence I didn't know I needed. They weren't ashamed of you, Lila. They were ashamed of how little they ever tried to know you. I blinked, surprised. What do you mean? He leaned forward. You've built a life they don't understand. You don't fit the image they've constructed for themselves. And instead of adjusting the picture, they just cropped you out. That's not your fault, that's cowardice. His words hit me like a tidal wave. Because somewhere deep down, I had still believed it was my fault, that I'd been too quiet, too awkward, too ordinary to earn a seat at their tables. But maybe I hadn't failed them. Maybe they had failed me. That night, after he walked me home, I stood alone in my apartment for a long time. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt clean, like a cleared-out room. And for the first time, I began to imagine what it might feel like to stop apologizing for existing, to stop chasing a seat at someone else's table, and build my own instead. Marco proposed to me on a crisp October evening, just as the sun was dipping behind the skyline of Seattle. We were on the rooftop of a tiny restaurant we'd stumbled upon during one of our Sunday walks. String lights overhead, soft jazz humming in the background. He pulled out a simple silver ring, his voice quiet but unwavering. "Lila," he said, "you've spent too much of your life being made to feel small. I want to spend the rest of our lives making sure you never feel that way again. Will you marry me?" I said yes before he could even finish the sentence. And just like that, the next chapter began. We started planning the wedding almost immediately. Not because we were in a rush, but because we wanted it to be ours. Every detail mattered. No big ballrooms or showy venues. We wanted intimacy, authenticity. We wanted the kind of day where everyone who came meant something. No politics. No performance. And that's when the decision became obvious. I wasn't inviting my siblings. Not Ethan, not Clara, not Vincent. Not even as guests, let alone bridal party. They weren't part of my journey. They hadn't walked with me through any of the hard parts. They weren't there when I cried into a pillow at 10, or stared at a baby photo named after me like I was already gone. They weren't there for me, so they wouldn't be there now. It wasn't a dramatic moment. I didn't draft a manifesto or send an angry email. I simply left their names off the guest list. It felt clean, quiet, powerful. 2 months before the wedding, I got the call. I was at my desk reviewing client spreadsheets when my phone lit up. Mom. I debated not answering. But curiosity, or maybe just habit, won out. Her voice was overly cheerful, like she was trying to sell me something. "Lila, sweetheart, how's everything going?" I sat back in my chair. "Fine." "That's great, honey. I've been meaning to ask. Your sister and brothers haven't gotten their invitations yet. Did you send them out already?" My heart kicked up, but I didn't flinch. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice even. "I sent them." A pause, then sharper. "Well, maybe theirs got lost in the mail?" I closed my eyes, inhaled slowly. "Mom, I didn't invite them." Silence. Not the kind of silence that's soft or stunned. This was the silence that buzzed, the kind that hits right before a storm. "What?" she finally snapped. "Lila, what do you mean you didn't invite them? They're your family." I kept my voice steady. "They didn't invite me to their weddings, Mom, not one of them, so I'm doing the same." "That's different," she said immediately, like she'd been waiting for that excuse for years. "You were just a kid. It wasn't personal." I let out a soft laugh, the bitter kind. It was personal to me. And then came the guilt trip, like clockwork. You're being vindictive, Lila. Spiteful. This is family. What are people going to think when they see your own siblings aren't there? There it was. The real concern. Not the wound, the optics. I don't care what people think, I said firmly. I'm not doing this to make a scene. I'm doing it because I want a wedding full of people who actually care about me, who showed up, and they never did. She hung up on me. I stared at the screen for a long time afterward, my hands still. I didn't feel angry. I felt steady. That night, I told Marco about the call as we made dinner. He stirred the pasta, then looked over at me and said, "You don't owe them anything. You're choosing peace. That takes more strength than people realize." I nodded, and for once I believed it. The group chat blew up that night. It started with Clara, as expected. She always preferred passive-aggressive over direct confrontation. "Hey, Lil, not sure if the mail's acting up or something, but none of us got wedding invites. Want to double check?" Followed by 3 fake heart emojis. Then came Ethan, blunt and cold as always. "You're not inviting us? Seriously? What's going on?" And finally Vincent, the one I'd once believed might actually care. Is this some kind of punishment? Lila, this isn't how adults handle things. I stared at the screen, heart racing, but not with fear, just fatigue. For a moment, I hovered over the reply button. I thought about telling them everything, reminding them of yellow dresses and cold silences, of missed birthdays and empty chairs. I thought about listing the exact number of times they made me feel invisible in my own family. But then I remembered something Marco had said to me once. You don't have to light yourself on fire to prove it was ever cold. So I didn't say a word. I just left the messages on read and closed the app. The next day, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I knew it the second I heard the knock. No one else knocks like that. Urgent, sharp, rehearsed. I opened the door, and there she was, face tight with disbelief, voice already sharp before I could say hello. "What are you thinking, Lila? Not inviting your own siblings to your wedding? What kind of daughter does that?" I stood in the doorway, blocking her path. "Mom, this is my wedding. I invited the people who've shown up for me. That's not them." She pushed forward anyway, stepping inside without asking, like it was still her house and I was still her little girl with no say. "This is childish," she said, hands on her hips. "You're holding a grudge from when you were 10. I closed the door quietly behind her. No. I'm holding on to the fact that 4 people I called family had the chance to include me in their most important days and chose not to. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted, voice steady. I begged to be at Ethan's wedding. I asked Clara with tears in my eyes. I messaged Vincent like a grown adult. I gave them every chance. They all said no. Her face faltered for the first time, but she quickly masked it with another sigh. "Well, they didn't mean to hurt you." "They did. Maybe not with fists, but with silence. And you helped them every time you told me I was too young, too emotional, too dramatic." She paused, and for a second, I thought she might actually listen. But then she folded her arms and said, "You'll regret this, Lila. Family is all you'll have in the end. You'll be alone one day, and they won't be there." I felt my jaw tighten, not with anger, but resolve. "No," I said, voice calm. "I won't regret choosing peace over pain. And if they won't be there, it's because they never were." I opened the door and looked at her. She hesitated. "This isn't how I raised you." "No," I said softly. "It's how you taught me to disappear." She left without another word. That evening, Marco and I sat on the floor of our living room, surrounded by wedding plans and half-eaten takeout. I told him everything. He didn't say "I told you so." He didn't try to fix it. He just pulled me close and whispered, "I'm proud of you." And I realized I was proud of me too. The morning of our wedding, I woke up before sunrise. The world outside was still, wrapped in a soft gray mist. I sat by the window in my robe, coffee in hand, watching the trees sway gently in the breeze. The garden venue was just a short drive away, a hidden greenhouse nestled between pine forests just outside Seattle. It was everything I had dreamed of: quiet, intimate, and untouched by all the noise I had spent most of my life trying to escape. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared something would go wrong, or that someone would trip during the vows, or that the playlist would glitch. The only thing tugging at the edge of my peace was the lingering sense that something, or someone, that might still try to steal a piece of the day. Marco and I had planned everything with precision. The guest list had been double-checked. The staff had been briefed. No one enters unless they're on the list. I wanted to believe that was enough. By the time I arrived at the venue with my best friend Jenna, the space had transformed into a dream. Twinkling lights stretched through the trees. Soft classical music drifted through the air. Rows of wooden chairs lined the aisle, flanked by wildflowers in gold and ivory. And at the far end, the glass greenhouse shimmered with morning light. I should have been thinking about vows and centerpieces and whether my mascara would smudge if I cried, but all I could think was, please, just let this day stay clean. And for a while it did. Guests arrived, hugs were exchanged, tears were wiped from cheeks. My coworkers from the firm mingled with Marco's college friends and our neighbors from the apartment building. Every single person who smiled at me held a history. They were here because they had earned a seat, not through blood, but through love. I was in the bridal suite when Jenna walked in, her expression tense. "You okay?" I asked. She hesitated. I wasn't going to say anything, but they're here. My chest tightened. Who? She looked down, then met my eyes. Ethan, Clara, Vincent, your mom too. They're outside the gate. I stood very still. They showed up without an invite? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jenna nodded. They told the security team they were immediate family and demanded to be let in. The guard checked the list. He wouldn't budge. Now they're just standing there. For a long moment, I didn't speak. A part of me, the old version of me, wanted to panic, to cry, to wonder if I'd made a mistake. But that part had grown small, quiet. I set down the bouquet, walked over to the small window at the side of the suite, and peeked out. And there they were, all four of them, standing just beyond the wrought iron gate, my mother clutching her purse like it was a shield. Clara in a white suit that tried too hard. Ethan with his arms crossed, jaw clenched. Vincent with his hands in his pockets, avoiding eye contact even from afar. They didn't look heartbroken. They looked angry, entitled, like they couldn't believe the gates weren't opening for them on command. I watched for a moment longer, then turned away. "Are you okay?" Jenna asked gently. "I'm perfect," I said, and meant it. Because for the first time in my life, the roles had reversed. I was no longer the girl on the outside looking in. They were the ones standing behind the glass, realizing too late what they'd thrown away. The ceremony began just as the sun filtered through the trees, scattering gold across the grass. I stood at the top of the aisle, bouquet trembling slightly in my hands, and looked out at the people gathered below. People who had shown up for me not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Faces full of warmth, kindness, memory. I locked eyes with Marco at the end of the path, his suit just a little wrinkled from hugging too many people, his eyes already glassy, and in that moment, the world shrank to him. I didn't think of the four figures standing on the other side of the gate. I didn't wonder what they were thinking or whether they were watching. They didn't belong here, not because I was being cruel, but because they had removed themselves from this story a long time ago. This day wasn't about them. It was about finally letting go. As I walked down the aisle, I felt lighter than I'd ever felt. Each step was a step away from a lifetime of begging to be seen, and a step toward the life I'd built with someone who never once asked me to shrink. We said our vows under the glass ceiling of the greenhouse, sunlight pooling like a blessing at our feet. Marco promised to never silence my voice. I promised to never disappear again. Not for anyone. When the ceremony ended, there wasn't a dry eye among us. Even my boss cried, and he was notoriously stone-faced in every Monday meeting. We laughed, we danced barefoot on the grass, and when the lights came on for our first dance, Marco whispered in my ear, "You did it. You let them go." And I had. But the final proof came later, after the speeches, the cake, and the music winding down. I slipped away for a moment just to breathe. I stood alone at the edge of the garden, the lights above me glowing like soft stars. That's when my cousin Talia approached, glass of champagne in one hand, phone in the other. "You want to laugh?" she said, smiling like she was trying not to. I raised an eyebrow. "Always." She handed me her phone. "Clara and your mom apparently threw a last-minute dinner tonight. Called it a celebration of family unity." I stared at the blurry photo. A long dining table, half empty. Familiar faces, mostly extended relatives, looking awkward. A banner behind them read, "Family first, always together." I burst out laughing. "Did anyone even show up?" I asked. Talia grinned. "Only the ones who didn't get invited here." I handed the phone back. Let them have their pity party. Just hope the food was good. And I meant it. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt done. Because the truth was, they could have dinner parties, group chats, and family photos without me for the rest of their lives. And I wouldn't care. Because I had built a life that didn't revolve around convincing people I was worthy of being in theirs. As the night drew to a close, Marco and I danced under the stars one last time. Friends surrounded us, clapping, singing off key, lifting their glasses to toast again and again. I looked up at him and whispered, "I'm so glad we did this. Our way." He smiled and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "This is just the beginning, Lila." And for the first time in my life, I believed it. They weren't there. They didn't get to witness the best day of my life. And that was their loss, not mine. Because I had joy. I had love. I had peace. And I didn't need their approval anymore. I never had.